go on to hear a work plan update. Here we got a couple of notes that are like on the very edge of being presented.
That's correct. So last month when I presented these two audits to you, I thought that these two would be completed by the end of last month. And there are two things that came up at the tail end of both reports. So for the Animal Services Department, I'm waiting on some information that I requested from the Georgia Department of Agriculture. I should receive that this week, and after I receive that, I can fold it into the report. The report is already complete, but I imagine whatever they send me will be part of the introduction of this report. And for the fleet management audit, since the last time we met at the last Audit Committee meeting, I had an opportunity to sit with the director of the director of the Central Services Department and the superintendent of the fleet management program. And we went through the findings and recommendations. And one of their concerns was there was not much mention of the fleet replacement program. And I indicated that it wasn't part of the original scope of the audit, and their concern was that in the FY21 budget process, their funding was significantly reduced, and they wanted that highlighted in the report so that it could be a topic to discuss going forward in the future about their needs. And I agreed to add a section or maybe a memo at the end of the report that speaks to what that reduction in funding, how it will affect that program and how it will affect their operations. And so I do anticipate completing that chapter, 1 to 3 pages in the next week or so, and then that report would be complete as well.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So this cool that the fleet management, it usually, Office of Operational Analysis is mostly focused on like the operational aspect of the department, not so much of the financial. I think all the departments are going to be hit, or all departments are hurting for FY21.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the financial, there's two ways to look at the financial. We don't conduct financial audits per se in the sense of what accounting or accountants do. We don't focus on debits and credits and reconciling numbers to kind of get to the even number at the end of the spreadsheet. That's not what we do. We evaluate the budget and operating dollars and internal controls to determine if funding is sufficient, possibly, if staffing is sufficient, or what the level of funding is and what it would cost to increase funding for a specific department. So from that respect, that's how the funding component is part of our operations. It's tied in with the operations, and it's not a sole responsibility. That's a standalone process by itself, like accounting.
Okay.
Okay. And Stephanie, can you just go ahead and tell us? We're supposed to pass or present the medical services, the sheriff's medical services audit before the mayor and commission. I understand there was some trouble getting that submitted since our clerk has been out. So
correct.
It did not appear on our agenda setting last night. Maybe the manager can answer the question how we can go ahead and make sure that gets on the agenda for our voting session in a couple weeks.
Can I first explain what happened?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a conversation with Christine, who works in the Clerk of Commission's office, and she, I submitted the agenda item last week, and she stated to me that it looked incomplete to her. Well, when I was in the software program loading the agenda item, I noticed that it looked different. For example, the top of the document and the very end of the document was different. And I just thought that was helpful. Like it was a measure of removing the duplication of efforts. We don't have to repeat that information. The only thing that I added was the body that consisted of the history, the findings and the facts, and then the options at the end, and also the recommendations. So the entire body was included in the report. The information that was missing was the title, the date of the voting meeting, and at the end, my signature. And so when Christine pulled it up, she thought that it was incomplete or I hadn't finished it. And I didn't know that it wasn't finished. And so she never mentioned it to me. So I thought it was going to be on the agenda on Tuesday. And so that's where that communication breakthrough fell.
Well, I don't see any reason why it can't get on the agenda. We amend that agenda all the time. So, can the manager give us some insight into that on how we can make sure it gets on the agenda for that voting meeting?
Sure. And, we can work with Christine. I mean, we don't have a role really in it other than if the mayor, says, I want it on the agenda, it gets on the agenda. I don't know if, suspension of rules or anything is required, but, since it missed the agenda setting, but it can be added at any time by the mayor.
I'll reach out to the mayor and make sure that happens. Because even last night we had 2 items that were blank agenda items because the information is not fully available yet until our voting meeting or a couple days before our voting meeting. I mean, that's common. All right, I'll reach out to the mayor and just make sure that we have that ready to be voted on by the whole body and we can get that completely out of our way.
And I'll follow up with Christine to make sure whatever was missing, it is added to the report and completed accurately tomorrow morning.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see what's next on our agenda. Okay. We want to take a look at the risk assessment. I know that Commissioner Wright had requested this document, which is basically a chart, a full data spread of the scoring for all the departments that underwent the risk assessment. Do you want to go ahead and, is there anything outstanding here? I mean, the standards in the field. Is there anything that stands out in particular to you, Stephanie?
Nope, not really.
Because there are departments that score exorbitantly higher than what might be the mean. But those tend to be public safety related departments, which you said is expected in these kind of risk assessments.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we also have our chart of departments that we, had been considering, through qualitative suggestions over the past year or two, and also through discussions we've had through the Mayor and Commission budget discussions and goals of discussions. You there?
I don't know where my screen is. I apologize. I see you all, but I don't see my screen.
I've got my document from my desktop pulled up. So I guess you're having trouble getting the document there. There's something.
I'll hop back on just one moment.
Okay. Well, maybe I can just start the discussion among the committee members. We really need to determine a work plan. I would like us, if we could even determine it tonight and ask the mayor to amend the agenda so we could possibly even vote on it at that October 2nd voting meeting. That would be ideal, because this would give the auditor the go-ahead to begin the early preparation for some of these audits. I'd like to begin by suggesting the Board of Elections as an audit target for the very reason that we're undergoing a big election year right now. And if we were to approve this work plan by October 2nd, this would at least give the auditor the go-ahead to observe how this election season goes. So then she can begin preparing questions and requests to begin the actual audit, maybe even in January or something, once everything's been tamped down, calmed down from, because I know election staff is going to be insanely busy for the next 2 months or maybe even longer. But this will allow the auditor to be able to observe and kind of know what to look for and what to ask for as an actual audit might begin in the next so.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So can we? I'm not in. I'm indifferent on that. But can we go back to the risk assessment scores?
Yeah, you want to look at how that relates to
yes.
the department talked about.
So I only had about a couple of hours to review this, but this is this risk assessment 2 is something that with the mayor and commission we voted on, utilizing to help determine what the office of the auditor, to help the office of the auditor to determine which department needs to be, which department needs to be audited. And I mean, the police department, leisure services, public utilities, even though, I mean, there's some, there's some red flags.
Yeah,
looking at the heat.
Went an extensive audit that just wrapped up about 3 years ago or so.
And that's the question I wanted to ask.
Okay.
Have anything? This is to Stephanie. Has anything dramatically changed as to why, or was there something missed? If we just perform the audit and I guess the heat index is so high.
Well, let me start by saying this. The risk assessment score shouldn't be the primary determinant for audit selections. It's used as a tool in tandem with the decision. The high scores and the low scores are primarily for you all as decision makers to understand where the levels of risk lie. And if you think about it like this, there are 3 ways to handle risk, but the primarily is you need to be aware of the risk. And this spreadsheet is making us aware as an organization of what areas of risk we have. And so as an organization, we can choose to be aware of the risk and keep our eye on it. The second thing we can do is be aware of the risk and want to fix it. And the third thing is to be aware of risk and ignore it. So the primary purpose of the risk assessment is to identify the areas of risk. And if it is an area that the decision makers decide this is worth looking into, or it reaches enough people and is very important for us to remedy, then that would be an area that is the risk assessment actually scores, but the risk assessment doesn't lead the decision, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
It supports it, but it doesn't lead the decision.
Yeah, it's not like the risk really necessarily changes over time, regardless of whether or not a department's been audited or some operational. It's some areas are inherently risky because you're dealing with that's just the mission of the department to deal with the public, especially when it comes to public safety and even an entity like leisure services where you have lots and lots of public interaction, lots of classes, people in parks, that kind of stuff.
Another thing with leisure services, they, when it comes to the various categories, you think about, they have scoring in all of the categories because they are so engaged with the community more than any other department. So not only do they engage with schools and with school-aged children, they also have recreation centers for neighborhoods. They also have plays and performances that they put on, and they also have citywide events. So when you think about the totality of the exposure to our community, it meets the financial risk, the reputation risk. It reaches a lot of the categories. So it's a high score, but it's not a bad score.
Okay.
It's okay.
But the higher the score, because we talked about that heat index, is more of a like, something that we need to be focused on. Because I'm really interested in the police department right now
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and the board of elections. But
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I'm particularly interested in those two areas myself. The Board of Elections, we've certainly had issues. We've had our board members dragged before the Secretary of State's, the state board. And there's certainly, a public distrust in the electoral system in general out there. I feel like this is an ideal opportunity to begin an operational analysis of our particular elections office. And it's an ideal opportunity because we do have an election going on now. So it's the ability to watch it in action. And the police department, we talk incessantly about criminal justice reform and, possible changes in the structure of our policing force, and how we approach criminal justice and public safety in this community. I mean, it's a hot topic across the nation. And I would hope that an analysis of this department would allow us to move forward in a pragmatic way, with a full understanding of the needs of the community and how the department's structured and, how it could possibly be restructured to better meet those needs. We've committed to this community building task force, public safety initiative. We've committed $350,000 towards it. And I feel like that committee can't begin to do its work unless they have that information. And I feel like it needs to be information that comes through the auditor's office, not internally provided. So I don't know if anybody else wants to look at any of the other, if we want to go beyond just assigning two, or if we want to look at some of these other
I think with staffing issues, can you hear me?
Repeat.
I think with the ongoing staffing issues in the audit department, I would not like to go more than two.
Mm-hmm.
Do like the idea of election coming up for observation, not surveys or anything, which would give us a kickstart for the actual Board of Elections office, audit for maybe January, like I think you said, Madam Chair. I think the police department is definitely should be the one of the two. With all the outrage going on, I don't that we should take this opportunity to look into our police department in a very objective way, and not all of the passion and anger. But I think we have the opportunity to be more proactive and more objective if we go ahead on and acknowledge we're going to start with the police department. So I think that it should be those two departments if we want to move forward. I think November is just observation, but not questionnaires to take people off focus. And I just don't think more than two audits is really not fair until the department staff is increased or is stabilized.
I would agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah, and if these get wrapped up quickly, then we can always amend the work plan and add on to it. And we we get a fully staffed office, but I do agree that for now, that seems like a wise path forward. Does that seem doable, Stephanie?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I have one question about the police department audit. I want to make sure I understand the goals of this particular
Yeah, we
audit.
need to talk about scope for both of these.
Okay, what I think I understand is this is going to be a fiscal evaluation of the various funding streams, and for the department, and with the goal of communicating to individuals any reduction in funding, how that would affect the services, the ability to deliver services, and how it would affect staffing levels at the police department. Am I understanding that correct?
I think that would be one element. I certainly think like the primary framework would be to be able to present an overall structure of the department. There are department units within the department. Overall structuring, the budgeting for each unit, the mission of each unit. We're not talking about any kind of policy analysis or anything like that. That's the job of the police oversight board and of this committee that we hope to get started. But this is, I would say this would be primarily a structural analysis, so we can be able to present to that committee a clear picture of what this department looks like and how it operates, and where the funding structure comes from, because a great deal of our
So
is funded by outside grants.
So today
okay, so I need,
my apology, Commissioner Thornton, go right ahead.
no, I just want to make sure. So this audit would be different than the sheriff's audit.
I would think so, because I don't think that we've set up a structure and a goal for some analysis, for some policy analysis, through the police advisory board that's just getting started. And I don't think the Office of Operational Analysis needs to look into policy. But in order to look into policy, another one of those bodies might need the information presented by this office. I feel like this office should present just the facts, basically facts and stats. How many officers are in this unit, what the budgeting is for this unit, where the funding comes from that unit, those kind of things. I think that can help offer a really good snapshot of our police department, devoid of all the emotion and intricacies of policy and basically a basic definition of the operational mission of each department. Maybe even some information about basic statistical information about what kind of calls are answered by each department, but nothing that would influence actual policy and action of that department. Primarily structural.
And
so
operational.
Citizen committees determine those policy recommendations.
Okay, got it.
Does that make sense? I'm trying to think. I know there's. Let me read my little document. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely
it makes sense.
Does that make sense? Yeah, and then and certainly an analysis of the funding, because quite a lot of the funding for our public safety departments comes from outside sources. There are all these grants and stuff. Maybe some idea of where the grants come from and how much leeway is given on the funds that are spent or grants.
All right.
Oh, Madam Chair, if I want to be clear, I think I heard you say that you don't think that the Public Safety and Safe Communities Committee should meet or convene before this work is complete. Is that right?
I mean, I think they could convene to set some of their own structure and goals. I just think that this would be a really instrumental tool for them before they, when they start to get down to the nitty gritty.
Okay.
I certainly think that committee should start meeting soon because it
Yes.
does take a while to set up, structure and policy and mission and all that stuff.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you, Blaine.
And just for the Board of Elections, just observational until.
Yeah, let's come up with a scope that is an observation of this November election and a collection. Maybe in January begin acting upon what you learn in those observations. Let me see.
Madam Chair, can I explain the beginning of our process?
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
So usually when we first assign an audit, the first thing we do is the very next day after the Tuesday's vote is contact the department just to notify them. And then we schedule a meeting sometime in the future. But between then, that day and that meeting, there's a lot of research conducted on our part as an office. And so we're doing different types of research and preparing our documents for submission to the various departments. And then we schedule just an entrance conference. That's what it's called. But it's basically the very first conference. You sit down with the director just to introduce yourself, to let them know what the parameters of the audit is. And it's still not the actual interview. It's just more so just to kind of go over the scope. And that is pretty much it. We still continue to do audit pre-planning is what it's called. But I wanted to share with you all that every single audit that we've conducted since the office has reopened has consisted of a component of observation. And so this would be an excellent time because of the election, just to be able to observe the process and to go to different polling sites just to collect information without talking with anybody. This is the only time that we can do it.
Great. So we have this list of objectives to be included in the scope. I'll read through them, and if anybody has any comment, we can add or subtract from them. To determine if the newly appointed BOE members receive orientation and training, determine if they have administrative support from any office within ACC, to determine if they advertise board meetings to the public, are meeting agendas and minutes available to the public on the website for the community, or are minutes accurately reflective of discussions and decisions voted on by the board. Apparently there are some transparency issues with the Board of Elections and communication issues between the board and office. So that's certainly something that I believe should be in the scope.
Okay.
Strategic priorities, do they exist between the Board of Elections, goals, objectives, vision, mission, key performance indicators to use as a measurement to track progress on shared goals, and the effectiveness of BOE's efforts to complete reporting and disclosure. We certainly had problems with, polling sites that had been combined, not being uncombined, and reports from board members that the elections office isn't necessarily following up in a timely manner on items that are voted on by the board. So I think that, once there's a full observation of how this upcoming election goes, I think that addressing those communication breakdowns between the board and election staff, and also just the even just the structure of the board itself. From what I understand, that this is a board that doesn't have a mission statement and goals. Just looking at the board from a basic framework of how good boards are run and basic board operating policies, I think would be something to look at. And the role of the board versus the role of the elections director and who answers to.
So, Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
So those are good points. I'm more interested in like an operational from, the board chair to from staff down, from the director, and how that synergy, the roles and I'm just losing my train of thought. Sorry, but the roles of each of those individuals, how they interplay with each other, and the goals that or the roles and responsibilities that they have.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's laid out anywhere in any kind of document.
It's not.
Yeah, and I mean, hopefully out of this process, the auditor will look at other types of elections and the kind of structural, actual documented structural elements they have that we can compare with what's going on here.
Yeah, in my pre-research for this meeting, I've reached out to other counties to ask if to inquire about successful relationships and why they were successful and what made them successful. So I have follow-up conversations this week and early next week with other Board of Elections departments and offices on this topic.
Well, I am comfortable with us moving forward with these two topics. Do you think maybe, Stephanie, you think you could write up an agenda? I mean, I would hope that, I wonder if we can get the agenda amended to include these. Because this meeting was supposed to happen last week. We usually schedule our meetings so they're in time for that agenda deadline.
I actually have one already prepared. I have a blank space for the department that was approved, so I have one prepared.
Okay.
Like a template. I just need to fill in the department and the proposed scope.
Well, I'll reach out to the mayor and see if we can get this on the agenda too, because that means that would give you the go ahead to begin the election preparation observation, because early voting starts in a couple weeks and absentee ballots. We should all be getting them in the mail any day now. Those kind of things are going to need to be observed, long before the actual election day. So I think it's crucial that, we get this approved as soon as possible. So I will reach out to the mayor and let him know that you'd like to write up an agenda report so we can vote on this at our voting meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody want to make a motion that we include the police department and the Board of Elections in a coming year work plan for the Office of Operational Analysis, and that we include the scope, all the things that we talked about in this meeting?
So moved.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, awesome. Yay, we have a work plan. Y'all don't know what a weight this feels like lifted off my shoulders.
Thank y'all very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. And I'll touch base with you tomorrow and after talking to the mayor and seeing what we can do about getting this agenda.
Okay. All righty.
Okay. So what is next on the agenda? Let me see.
That's it.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Next meeting, October 14th. Does that sound like the right date to get us in time for that agenda deadline?
It's the second Wednesday
Yeah.
of the month, I believe. Let me just check.
Blaine, is that the right deadline in order for her to be able to submit an agenda item if we were to pass something that night?
So, well, the deadline for any cycle typically is the last Wednesday of the month for the next cycle. You can do a title only and submit it later. Typically, for commission purposes, you'd like to have it on at least the agenda setting session, as you know, just so they can see it. Does that answer your question?
I don't know, like, I feel like we were trying to have this meeting on the second Wednesday of the month for the for the reason that we could get anything we voted on into the next voting session.
Well, you can do that. I'll just say all the other departments follow they submit it on Wednesday and it's reviewed the first Wednesday of the month, the second Wednesday of the month. The mayor and the mayor pro tem and the attorney and the clerk and the auditor all meet and talk about, the what's going on the agenda, and that's where they decide that first run at the consent agenda, and then of course the following Tuesday, or that Friday, it goes out to the public, and then the following Tuesday it goes to agenda setting session.
So maybe we should try and aim for that first Wednesday, the 7th, because we'll have those 2 reports to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's a chance we could go ahead and get those approved so they do get into that November cycle, and we can just have a completely clear slate.
I'm cool with that.
Is everybody okay with October 7th?
5:30.
5:30 on October?
That's fine.
Okay.
So the reports you're talking about, you're talking about Fleet, the 2 that they're being finished up, or the 2 that have been assigned tonight?
The 2 that have been finished up.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we could just see those, get those copies as soon as they're wrapped up, get them out to the whole committee, so we will have completely read it and possibly can get through that meeting pretty quickly, and move those along if at all possible. Is that doable?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second.
Second. Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Right. All right, y'all. Thank you. That was relatively painless.
Enjoy
Thank
the
you.
rain.
Goodbye.
All right. Take care. Have a good night. Thank you.
you, everybody.